the Chicagoland Corvair Enthusiasts Car Club. 4 of our 5 girls have never heard of a Corvair. I cannot believe it. I really can't. It makes me feel old. Renee, you told me you'd never heard of these things?
No, and you're so shocked.
Yes, and what do you think now? Are you enjoying this one?
Oh, definitely. You know I like convertibles.
Cindy, you knew about Corvairs a little bit.
A little bit.
Okay, do you know how long Corvairs are made?
No.
Do you know what models they had?
No.
Do you know why the car was important?
No.
Do you know who Ralph Nader is?
No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, well, we're going to learn all of those things on today's show, and also on today's show, we have a brand new girl with us, and that's Kim Adams. Am I saying it right, Kim?
Yes, you are, Bill.
Are you nervous?
A little bit.
Okay, I'm going to put you to work right off the bat so that you're not nervous. I want you to look at the camera and say...
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
We might as well start right off the bat with perhaps the most important part of this program today. This book, and Chuck, I'm going to ask you to come in on this as well as you can. This book was the book that made a fellow named Ralph Nader famous, and I suppose made the Corvairs infamous. We're going to talk about this in a minute because it's really an important part of the story today, but first of all, we're going to find out who at least one of the players is today, and you are.
Larry Claypool.
And where are you from, Larry?
Right here in Frankfort, Illinois.
Okay. Before we talk about the book, what have we got behind us? We've got a huge group of people. These can't all be Corvair enthusiasts.
Well, you're absolutely right. They are all Corvair enthusiasts. We've got about 162 members in our chapter, and these are some of the people here today.
That is amazing for a car that hasn't been made in almost 25 years.
Yeah. Well, there's Corvair enthusiasts throughout the country, almost 6,000 in the national club.
There's a national club also?
Oh, sure, yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. Now, I opened this talking about this book, Unsafe at Any Speed.
Right.
You're familiar with it, I'm sure. In fact,
yes.
It's an original copy?
Yeah.
Okay, explain to the audience why I think this is important in our story today.
Well, Ralph Nader was a relatively unknown lawyer in Washington, and he wrote that book that concerned itself with automotive safety. And the first chapter of that book dealt with the 60 to 63 variety Corvair, and he called it an unsafe handling vehicle. And that book and General Motors' investigation of Ralph Nader made big headlines, particularly the investigation, and that got Ralph Nader in the news.
You're exactly right, and as a matter of fact, the interesting thing about the story is it really started the entire Nader consumer groups.
Absolutely. The attention that was focused on Ralph Nader when it became known that General Motors was trying to find something on him propelled him into the limelight and started an entire working of consumer interest in safer automobiles and the Automobile Safety Acts.
As a matter of fact, the fact that General Motors went and investigated Ralph Nader and tried to get something on him, and they handled it in that fashion, they ended up paying him a bunch of money, which really funded the beginning of all the consumer groups.
Oh, yeah, right. It was a badly done investigation, and it really got Ralph started on his whole career.
Okay, and probably the most interesting part about it is Ralph Nader was wrong. There wasn't really anything wrong with the Corvair. What it was different.
Right, yeah. In 1970, the Department of Transportation, at Ralph Nader's urgings, made a comprehensive study of the handling of the Corvair. They released their report in 1971, and they found that the Corvair handled as good as anything else built at the time, but the report was released 2 years after the last Corvair was made.
Exactly. Now, hold on one second. We've got a question down here, and I was just about to go down here to ask the girls a question anyhow. Christine?
What would have provoked him to investigate the Corvair? I mean, did he own one and he didn't think that they were safe? Or what would provoke him to pick out the Corvair?
Interesting question. I'm not sure we ever know really what provokes a Crusader, but perhaps you know the answer, Larry.
Yeah, actually I do. Ralph Nader felt that the Corvair, because it was a new car in 1960, ought to have the utmost and latest design for safety, and that the car was sold in large numbers, so there was a lot of them around, and more importantly, it was made by the largest corporation, General Motors. So he felt that because of those three things and the very different nature of the Corvair, that it had many different features on it, that it would make a good target.
Okay, now what I'm going to do, folks, this is a long way about introducing the Corvair, but it's hard because it's a technical entity that we're interested in, but it's also a political entity.
Yeah, there's the Corvair launched the career of a consumer advocate and virtually changed within a couple years the entire way that the automobile industry had to think about designing cars due to the safety aspect involved.
Okay, but I bet we're not getting anywhere because, Renee, you've heard our discussion so far. Do you know anything at all about a Corvair yet?
No, I'm still lost.
Okay, let's do the important part. Larry, step over here. I want you to step away from the front from this particular car. This is an example of the very first models that they came out with. This is a 61, as I understand it, and the first models were 60, but they were identical?
Basically the same. There's two series of Corvairs, the early cars and then the later cars after 65. The body styling is basically the same. Of course, with any car, there's technical changes each year as they continue product improvement.
Okay, go ahead and describe the car. For a person that never heard of a Corvair, what is a Corvair?
Okay, well, first off, it's a Chevrolet. It's a Chevrolet product, and it was Chevrolet's answer to the smaller car and imported cars that were becoming quite popular in America in the late 50s. So Chevrolet went off to design its own Volkswagen beater, essentially, something that would be Chevrolet's answer to the imports. And Chevrolet's approach was to make pretty much an Americanized style Volkswagen. In other words,
I'm surprised you will concede that point.
Well, the concept is there. It's a rear engine car. It's air cooled. The trunk is in the front. There are a great deal of differences. Certainly, there's no interchangeable parts between a Corvair and a Volkswagen. There's no design that was taking place between them, but the similarities on paper: rear engine, air cooled, independent suspension, trunk in the front. The similarities are there.
Okay, more than that, and just stay put for a second. And Chuck, if I can get you over here. What he's saying, folks, if Chuck wasn't panning while we were talking, the trunk on this car is in the front, and the engine is in the rear, and it's an air-cooled opposed engine, also very much like a Volkswagen. But most important, from the concept of, or the standpoint of comparing it to a Volkswagen, is the way these pieces were arranged. Of course, the Volkswagen, and we're talking about the original Beetle Volkswagen, was an opposed air-cooled four-cylinder. This is a much larger car. This is an opposed air-cooled six-cylinder. But what's most interesting about it, and the reason the comparison is made, is the engine bolts into this car the same way that Volkswagen did it. In other words, the engine is not bolted to the chassis. The engine itself is bolted to the bell housing with the clutch in it and the transaxle and all that in exactly the same fashion that the Volkswagen Beetle was. Now, Cindy, are you getting all this?
Well, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
The Corvair, is it the type of car like is in Chevy, or I mean, what?
Yes, a Corvair was a model, a Chevrolet model, very much like that there are Chevrolet Corvettes and there are Chevrolet Impalas.
But it was a Chevy.
Exactly. You couldn't hear us from this end down here.
I didn't hear what was over
Yes, this is a Chevrolet Corvair. It was one of the Chevrolet model lineups, and what it was created for was this was created in 1960, and at that time lots of foreign cars were coming in with better gas mileage and all that, and this was General Motors' effort to try to compete in that market. Now I'll ask you a quick trivia question. What was Ford Motor Company's effort in the same market?
Mustang?
Kim, go ahead. No, go ahead. What was it?
Mustang?
Nope. Kim, go ahead and tell her.
I don't know either.
Okay, doesn't know either. We'll get down here because I know that we've got Cindy here, and I know that Cindy knows. Little Cindy, I should say. Little Cindy, step out here for a second. The question was, this was Chevrolet's entree into the small car, economy car market. At least that was their original intention with the car. It changed, and we'll get into all that. What was Ford's effort in the same arena?
You know, I don't know.
I know, but I love to tease you. I love the look you get because she gets so mad at me because she wants me to come over and ask her questions that she knows about, and I never do that, do I?
Right.
Because I want to tease the girls. Okay, we'll get down here because now Renee is going to answer the question. Renee, Ford's answer, or this was Chevrolet's entry into the economy car market. That's the reason the original intention of the Corvair, you can see it's a four-door sedan. It's like a family passenger car. It was an American, they felt too many Americans were buying Volkswagen Beetles and all those other, and they wanted a piece of that market. What was Ford's entry into that market the same year?
Look who you're asking.
Chris?
The Falcon.
That's exactly
I
correct.
would never have guessed that.
Okay, and what was different about the Falcon and the Corvair?
Well, I don't think the Falcon had a rear engine.
Right. The Falcon was, in effect, a miniature, normal American car. Front engine, rear-wheel drive, the traditional, just like a full-size American car made smaller. This was a revolutionary concept. General Motors' approach was revolutionary. American cars had not been built like this before.
Well, wasn't that the start of the compact car era?
That's exactly correct. And what Chrysler Corporation followed a couple years. Okay, I'll give you the chance.
No, don't ask
Chrysler Corporation started a couple years later with their entry into this marketplace. What was that?
The Chrysler?
Chrysler Corporation.
I don't know.
Tell her, Larry.
Was the Plymouth Valiant and the Dodge Lancer.
Exactly, identical cars with slightly different nameplates. Okay, now we have mentioned, step out here again, Larry. We have mentioned that this was Chevrolet's original concept was to take and make an economy car for the masses and all that. Didn't end up that way.
Well, right. The Corvair was originally designed for that low-end economy market, and as it turned out, people generally resist change. They like ordinary things, and the Falcon rather handily outsold the Corvair, about 3 Falcons to every 2 Corvairs. And at Chevrolet, there is no place for second place. So not too long after the Corvair's introduction and saw the way the sales were shaping up, Chevrolet decided immediately to concentrate on building their own Falcon clone, a very simple, straightforward, ordinary economy car, and that appeared 2 years later as the Chevy 2.
And what happened to the Corvair?
The Corvair, almost by accident, found a market that it wasn't known to exist. Shortly after the Corvair's introduction, this was the ordinary 4-door sedan that came out at first. Shortly after introduction, they brought out the 2-door Corvair and the top-of-the-line model, the Monza. It was trimmed very well inside, had bucket seats. They had a higher horsepower engine available. It started to be a kind of sporty car. It still had room for everybody in the back. It had a real seat and everything in the back and was a fun car, but it was still inexpensive. And that started the market that wasn't known to exist at that time.
Right, so what they did was they really entered the sports, not sports cars, but sporty car
Sporty,
market.
right, sporty as opposed to a true sports car, because of course the Corvette was also in production. They were handling that segment of the market well. But up to that time, there was no sporty, inexpensive cars. There were lots of sports cars, but there was not sporty, inexpensive ones.
Okay, folks, and I'm going to tell you something. This gets real interesting as we go along, so I don't want our real hardcore motorsport people to run away. If you're not familiar with the Corvair, trust me, we end up with 4 carburetors and finally turbocharged versions. Very cool. As a matter of fact, I had a good friend of mine that used to run at the International Amphitheater. They had indoor drag races in the wintertime, and he had a turbocharged Corvair Spider that was top eliminator week after week after week against Hemis and 427 Fords and all that. You probably don't even were aware of that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait, we got a question here?
I'm trying to get the gist of all this. If this was such a cool car and, good time running, what happened to it? Why did it stop?
Why don't we...
Great.
I want you to remind me of that question as we get to the end of the program, because it is not always the case that good, cool cars continue to exist, and we'll get to that towards the end of the show. Right now, I want to move on because we want to look at some other things, and I know our audience wants to get to the cool stuff, and we got a couple steps in between, right?
Right. Yeah, we got all sorts of neat stuff here.
Okay, just a minute now. Let me get down here because we've got a couple little girls here I think would be glad to help us out. Girls, can you come on out here for a second, please? Come right out here. I want you both to stand right here. Okay, and I want you to look over at that camera, and I want you to say...
We'll be right back.
Today, I have not forgotten your question. I am going to get to that about what happened to the Corvair, but first I want the audience to know exactly what a Corvair is. And we also have a new player here today, and when we've got another pretty girl, you know right away we've got to introduce him to the audience, right?
That's right. First thing.
The first thing. And you are?
Mary Beth Claypool.
And Mary Beth, I understand you're a Corvair enthusiast also.
Yes, born and raised.
When you say born and raised, you meant you were pre-Corvair, pre-Larry?
Yes, very much so.
Is that right? Seriously?
Yes, very seriously.
Okay.
found it in her
Wait, what?
They found it in her DNA.
Oh, boy, are you getting comfortable on camera? Nicely said. Then you perhaps can, better than Larry, explain the technical details of a Corvair. What made up a Corvair? What was so important about the Corvair technically?
Technically, the Corvair was important because the engine was in the rear, and it has a flat opposed 6-cylinder engine.
And why is a flat opposed 6-cylinder? And Chuck, maybe you can take a shot of this while we're talking about it if you're not already doing so. Why is a flat opposed 6-cylinder engine a superior design?
I don't know.
Go ahead and tell her, Larry.
It's inherently balanced.
Bingo. Right on it. Christine, you remember? Oh, Chris is on the other side, but I'm sure. Wait just a minute. Wait. Say what now?
I knew that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. There's one she knew and she was on the wrong side. Yes, as a matter of fact, the flat opposed six-cylinder design is an inherently perfectly balanced design. Really an ideal. The only problem is to put it in the front of a car is a major problem with steering situations and front suspension and all that, although there is a car, the Subaru, that has nicely done in the front of the car. But go ahead and tell us about the rest of this technically.
Well, as we had noted, the Corvair is a rear engine design, and therefore lightweight was important to the design of the engine, so great quantities of aluminum are used in the construction of it. This is a cutaway powertrain, so we can actually see the Corvair motor under most of its sheet metal. In the foreground is a Corvair motor as you would normally see it in the car with all its engine shrouding attached.
Let me stop you right there so the audience knows what we're talking about. We're talking about this one right here. This is an actual engine out of a Corvair, literally just brought over here on a wheelbarrow because I wanted to show it to our audience, because the cutaway has a lot of the sheet metal. All of this sheet metal around here is all part of the ducting, so when this fan is sucking in air, it blows it over the cylinders and cylinder heads. And in order to see it better, up on this one, all of the shrouding and the ductwork and all has been removed, but it's really just sheet metal. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Bill. The engine block and all the accessory covers are made out of aluminum. The cylinder heads are made out of aluminum. The cylinders themselves are cast iron for long life on it.
Okay, now we got a question down here, I think. Christine, I heard you hollering for me.
Right, I was just going to ask that question. Was that relatively new to be using aluminum motor?
It was relatively new for and that's why the Corvair was really so important, because it was kind of revolutionary, but not revolutionary in the world, but revolutionary for American automotive products. The heavy use of aluminum in the rear engine, the air cooling.
Right, yeah, not since the Franklin cars of the 30s had air cooling really been used in any American design, although they had been used in European cars quite a bit. So it was very new for any American car, especially a big conservative corporation like General Motors.
Yes, it was actually quite a departure, and as a matter of fact, I've actually written a book, and part of the book I talked about this a little bit, not necessarily just Corvair, but if you remember the Pontiac Tempest had a flexible drive shaft in it. It was kind of revolutionary, and what always saddened me was any attempts that the American automobile manufacturers seemed to make at higher tech designs or revolution was not met with success in the marketplace.
Yeah, nobody really cared. People resist change, and just ordinary plain Me Too cars are really the basis of volume sales.
Thus, what happened to the Corvair, in effect, was that it became an enthusiast car. It had quite a cult following, but cult followings don't lend themselves to 200,000 units per year, but they give a strong following, but not big numbers, and that's kind of what killed the Corvair eventually. But we're going to get to all that. Is that starting to make more sense?
Yes, it is.
It was a big enthusiast car and a cult following car. Larry, if I'm not right, please.
Sure, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, the market that the Corvair created for a smaller, inexpensive sporty car certainly did not go unnoticed by other manufacturers, and Ford in particular hit the nail on the head when they came out with the Mustang in '64, because that was basically a simple car. It used Falcon chassis and drivetrain, but they started styling it from the standpoint of being sporty. They didn't have to concede any rear seat room. They put a very long hood. It was all style on that car, and no compromises for economy or four-door models.
And it was traditional American design. Front engine, rear drive, but it had a sporty concept and flair to it. Yes, Renee?
So also then competition played a big part.
It played, but I don't really think, and Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because really you're the expert here, not me. I don't really think Corvair ever really had any competition. I think Corvair stands unique in the marketplace then and now.
Well, the Corvair was very unique, and it, as you said, it certainly had an enthusiast following. But that market, when the Corvair Monza two-door coupes were selling very well, the competition took the cue, came out. In '63, every manufacturer had a smaller car with bucket seats, and by the '64, everyone had them available with V8 power. And that's where the market was heading, and unfortunately, there was no good redesign of the Corvair available to be an effective competitor in that new segment of the market.
Okay, now don't go away. We got questions everywhere here, and yes, Christine?
Larry, you don't look old enough to have been there when the Corvair was in its era. What made you choose Corvairs?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I am always interested in younger people, why they get enthusiastic about something that was from my period, my era.
Right. Well, my first car was a Corvair, and that's when I was 15. And when you're 15, you either have to have a lot of money to have your car fixed, or you got to know how to work on it yourself. And I chose the latter of the two, and my chosen car was a Corvair, and I became pretty good at it. At the time, in the very early 70s, there were lots of Corvairs. I mean, everybody had one. There were cars everywhere, and you could get them for next to nothing at that time. So I had kind of a steady business of fixing cars for people.
Okay, now I want to move on here because we've got so much to show you today, and there's. Okay, I'm sorry, Kim.
That's okay.
Okay, we'll come back to you in that because I want to move on to the next segment. And one thing you're going to learn on Motorsports Unlimited, we want the girls to ask questions because very often us experts overlook things that really the public isn't understanding. The thing I really wanted the audience to see over here, and Chuck, we're going to have to take this shot afterwards, but you can take it from that angle, is if you'll notice, this is the back of the bell housing. When the engine goes in the chassis, just like on a Volkswagen Beetle, what happens is it is literally hung on the transaxle. It bolts to the transaxle here. It is not like normal engines that you like V8 engines that you're used to seeing that'll have engine mounts that go to the frame and all that. This bolts to the back of the transaxle in the same fashion that the Volkswagen Beetle did. That's why it was so often compared. The opposed air-cooled engine, even though it was larger and bigger, the design concept was very, very similar. We'll get that. Hopefully that shot is in there. Yes?
Could this also be used in I know a lot of fellas that like build T-buckets and some race cars, they take that whole thing out of the VW and use it. Can you do that with this?
We're going to get into that. Exactly right. As a matter of fact, if you were building back in the late 60s when the dune buggy craze was going full speed, the dune buggy to have was one with a Corvair engine bolted in place of the opposed 4 Volkswagen. Have I got it right?
Oh, absolutely. Corvairs were the motor to have in dune buggies and kit cars.
Right. You replace that 40 or 50 horsepower Volkswagen engine with a 180 horsepower turbocharged Corvair, and you had a rocket ship.
Right.
Yes.
How come I never heard of this Corvair? Am I living with blinders on? What's...
Because you're still a baby, Renee.
Oh, well, then it shows your age. Well,
it really does. Cindy, do you have a question?
Is this the first turbocharged engine that ever came out? Or
no, it really wasn't. Turbocharging has been around for many, many years, but General Motors went through a period of turbocharging enthusiasm at about this time. They had a turbocharged Corvair. They also had a turbocharged Olds F85, the aluminum V8, I'm sure you recall.
Sure, the Jetfire model. That was available only in 62 and 63. However, the turbo Corvairs are made from 62 to 66, and up until the time that General Motors got back into turbocharging with their V6 Buicks in the late 70s, there were more turbo Corvair installations than any other factory-installed turbochargers in any other car.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a glitch in General Motors' lifespan that they went through to turbocharged enthusiasm. Now, again, we got so much to get to. I want to move on to the next segment, and I know how to put a pretty girl to work. So if I get you to step out here just for a moment like this, I want you to look over that camera and say...
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
off camera, I had a question, and Bill told me that Larry was just the guy who could explain it to me. Larry, why is the engine in the rear?
There are several advantages to having a rear-engine car, the most important of which is traction. Because the engine and the transaxle is in the back, approximately 60% of the weight of the entire car is concentrated on the back wheels. That's kind of the same principle behind the extra traction on a front-wheel drive car where you have all the weight over the driving wheels. Conventional cars built up to the time of the Corvair had the engine in the front and the drive wheels in the back. So at best, you had 50% of the weight on the wheels, and with 60%, like on the Corvair, you have much better traction under icy, snowy, muddy conditions. So you can really get going in a Corvair and go places that a conventional car wouldn't have been able to go.
And so it's great for racing then.
Yeah, traction off the line, people who have ever run Corvairs know that even despite the fact that the Corvair is a relatively small engine, there's very few cars that leave the line harder than a Corvair simply because they just don't have a wheel spin problem.
And I also noticed that the gas tank is in the front.
Right. Actually, it's in a very well-protected place, and even Ralph Nader conceded that the Corvair has its gas tank in one of the best possible places. It's behind the front suspension, just in front of the tow pan, where there's quite some area between the front of the car and the gas tank, and the front suspension protects it. So in rear-end collisions, there's no possibility of any fire or gas leak, and even in very major front-end collisions, the Corvair gas tank's in a very well-protected area.
Oh, that's good, because that would scare me too. So then the front is like the trunk, basically?
Exactly. Why don't we have one of the girls open it up there and show you what the trunk looks like?
Matter of fact, Cindy, why don't we join them up there? And if you would too, Larry, please, let's step right on up here. And actually, Cindy, as you can see, there's a fairly large trunk in there.
Yeah, it is pretty big.
The other thing that we wanted to point out is another advantage, and everything, by the way, folks, we want to say, and this is the problem I always had with Ralph Nader. When you point out front engine car, rear engine car, front drive car, rear drive car, all-wheel drive car, and all that, every one of them has advantages and disadvantages. Right. There's no free lunch on anything, and what we do is make compromises, and it seemed to me that was the point that Nader missed.
Certainly, and as you say, and every design has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage with the front engine, with the front trunk on the Corvair, is that because you need room to steer the wheel wells intrude into the trunk area a fair amount, and trunk space was never a large factor in the Corvair. You know, the trunk is comparatively small, and that detracted some from sales.
Absolutely. Now, if you back up here a little bit, and Cindy, you were about to say something, and I don't want to stop one of the girls when they want to...
This car does not have power steering.
This car, and that's the last thing we wanted to show you. A couple of other advantages of having a rear-engine car is that, number one, you end up with a flat floor because you don't have a transmission or anything going to the back, so it saves footroom for the center passenger in the car. Also, because the front end is so light, because there's no engine up there, that it feels like it has power steering without. Now, I'd like you to go ahead and get in and see if you can make my point. Go ahead and jump in, and first of all, I'll be right with you, Christine. All right. Now, notice there is no obstruction for the center passenger if you had one.
A lot of legroom.
Yeah, a lot of legroom. And now go ahead and turn the steering wheel to the left.
Oh, it's real easy.
Exactly, because there is no engine to put a lot of weight on the front wheels. And Christine, you had a question?
Yes, because the engine is mounted in the back, then would this be a rear-wheel drive car?
It's not necessary for it to be, but I can think of no examples of a rear-engine front-drive car. But you could certainly engineer one. But this is a rear-engine. Yeah, this is a rear-engine, rear-wheel drive car. I want to move on to the next car because again we've got so much to show you because they also made vans and they made what were sort of pickup trucks. We've got a lot to look at. So Cindy, if you would tell the folks.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
All right, Cindy Scolio, what are you sitting in? Corvair Greenbrier. This is the famous Corvair Greenbrier. And what is one of the most, I want you to lean forward here, what is one of the most noticeable things, and then we've got three girls in the front seat, what's the most noticeable thing there?
There's nothing in the way here, and then the floor is all, you know.
Yeah. Right, it's one of the advantages. They were asking about why a rear engine, and if you guys would, everybody file out here now. And they were asking why a rear engine car, why would somebody do that? And one of the advantages is, for example, when you put three people in the front seat, wait just a minute. If you guys would step right over here, we've got a complete wide front area here with nothing to interfere because there is no mechanical drivetrain components up here. Everything is in the back, and you guys had room to stretch out back there.
Yeah, I could stretch my legs out completely, and no problem. Nothing was in the way. You know, it was great. It felt good.
The point is, there are some advantages to having a rear engine.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to point out, that there are advantages. And don't think for a moment that you don't end up with a significant amount of room. And as I understand it, by pulling this thing one more notch, we can really let it swing open here. One of the advantages, again, of not having a driveline going with an engine in the front going to the back of the car is that you end up with a flat, low floor, giving plenty of seating room in here, right?
I think we could use this on our, on
our chutes. On our chutes. It wouldn't be bad at all. Why don't you step on out here now, if you would, and join the other girls. And Cindy, you were the one that originally posed the question, why would somebody do a rear engine? Is it starting to make more sense?
A lot more.
Okay, there are some real practical reasons to do it. It's not just done for styling purposes. There's really some practical reasons for it. Now, we have got, and Chuck, I want you to widen your camera shot. We have got here arranged kind of an example of almost all of the Corvair, and I want to say Corvan, and Larry's can probably straighten that out for me. I always call these Corvans. I don't know if I made it up or if that was a real name. But first, you had an interesting story about this one.
This van was used for a movie production company for a movie they were making with Joe Pesci. It didn't look like this at all when they were filming it. They painted it dirty red and kind of put a little bit of rust on it, and then they repainted it back for the owner the way he had it.
So you're sort of proud of it?
Yes.
Joe Pesci wrote in it?
Yes, he did.
That's pretty cool.
But it's not my van.
But it's not. But she was so proud of it. I said, I want her to come and tell the story. Okay. Now the next thing I want to look at, and girls, I want you all to come this way over here. And Larry, if you would, come down here and explain what we're looking at here. And I kind of know. And by the way, when I say Corvan, come over here, please. When I say Corvan, am I making that up? Girls, I want you to go down that way.
Nope, that's absolutely correct, Bill. The name Corvan refers to the panel van commercial style model of the Corvair truck, of which we have the green one behind us, is exactly that model called the Corvan.
Okay, let's go back there. I want you to open up the doors here, if you would. Just break open the doors. And again, I want the public to see that there are advantages to the rear engine design in that you end up with, and Chuck, you're going to have to tell me if you're, I'm going to step out of the way here. It's a little awkward. I don't know if you can see into the front area there, but it's a totally flat floor across. And if you look here, there's also a low, easy to load platform for any kind of commercial use.
Right. As commercial vehicles, not only does the rear engine have a great advantage in having the very low floor, but of course it has very good traction with the rear engine, and the weight of the van stays the same whether you have it empty like this or you load it up full of its maximum payload. Correct. It always stays with the same weight distribution front and rear whether you have the truck empty or loaded.
Right, and now I want you, because we want to be honest with our audience, what's the disadvantage of the rear engine?
Because the rear deck area has to be higher for the engine, you see that it steps up just behind our door and raises up about 17 inches or so that the floor is not totally flat all the way back.
Right, it makes it for high loading going into the back. Right. So there are, engineering works that way. It's aggravating and frustrating. You get something, you give up something. That's the way it works. Now, in addition to these kind of units, they also had them set up like this. And girls, if you would come on down here, they had them set up like this. And this has become, I hate to keep using the example of Volkswagens, but it's really hard not to compare these things to Volkswagens. I use they actually had camper versions of these things.
I like that.
What's that?
I like that a lot.
I do too.
Pardon me? Renee, why don't you go ahead and jump in there and tell our audience, because they probably won't be able to see it quite as well as you can, what you see around there, including a little sink.
Yeah, there's a sink, cabinets, a countertop.
Wait a minute.
It looks like there's a room, even enough room for a bed. You can lay down.
That was one of the advantages of the Corvair. They took advantage of the rear engine, of the area the rear engine took up to mount beds. And Larry, if I'm incorrect, please say so. But they
that's exactly right. The rear seat that she's on right now, we lift it up and screw two legs in the bottom of it, and it makes a sleeping area inside the truck. And these were pretty heavily promoted by Chevrolet, and they appeared in a number of the camping magazines at the time. And these were available from the factory at your dealership with the camper package fully installed in it.
Much like Volkswagen did.
Exactly.
With their microbus. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since how there's a rear, the motor is in the rear, and since they have the bed on it, wouldn't it, how sometimes when you're in the front and they have that hump in the front where they're driving, and it gets real warm, does that get too uncomfortably warm for laying on the bed in the back? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, remember, the engine wouldn't really be running while you're sleeping in the thing, but I think you mean if somebody's taking a nap in the back.
Right.
Well, actually, I've driven this particular van to a number of places, and just this summer we went to San Jose, California with it, and it is quite comfortable in driving because of the way the airflow comes. It comes in from the top and goes out the bottom, as opposed to a regular van where the cold air comes in. By the time it gets to the motor, it's warm. So you have the warm air coming through on a regular van, but on a Corvair van, it's actually the cool air is in contact with the area you're closest to.
Yes, it's really nice setup. Yes, Renee? Step right on out here. Go ahead.
Also, there's a lot of windows in here. There's this one up here, this here, which actually lets a lot of light in.
Again, that was part of the package for the camper version, right?
Actually, that particular top is an item that I put on. You may recognize it as Olds Vista Cruiser.
I was going to say, the Vista Cruiser from the... Okay, so that wasn't... The Chevy didn't do it that way.
Chevrolet didn't do it, but Chevrolet never put the roof on like that, but all the rest of the interior in the truck is correct as delivered.
Okay, last thing, let's slide down here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
With the motor being in the back, is it noisy at all?
As a matter of fact, it actually gets the noise further away from you. It may be a little bit noisier from the outside, but inside they were quite quiet.
Yeah, the vans are a little bit, it acts like an echo chamber, like you would imagine, for echoing in the back. But generally the noise is fairly low since it's all the way behind you. You're not next to the engine as in a conventional van.
Okay, next thing we've got, girls, everyone down here, because this I think is the most intriguing of all the, and watch my audio cable please, I think, and if you guys would just all kind of group yourselves right around here, if you guys, right over here, this, I think, is perhaps the most intriguing demonstration of some of the advantage that a rear engine can give you, and you are.
Al.
Say it again.
Al.
Al what?
Al Freehoff.
And where are you from, Al?
I'm from Bolingbrook.
Okay, we've got to get all this in because this guy is actually going to muscle this engine, we hope, on camera, into this thing, and part of the advantage here is that you have a very low side loading.
Correct.
Because no driveline components go through it. All of the driveline components in the Corvans or pickups, if they still call them Corvair, goes from here back, and it gives you a lower area. So if you would go ahead and open up, and this, as I understand it, was standard on these Corvairs.
Yeah, this particular model is called the ramp side pickup for obvious reasons, the side loading ramp. And this rather unique truck was built from 61 through 64.
Okay, and what he is loading in there, and I didn't think this was going to be doable on camera, and I sure knew that our girls couldn't do this, right, girls? What do you think?
No way.
What he's loading there is a complete Corvair engine.
Oh, it's strictly a man's job, yes.
Yeah, you guys, wait a minute. Did you want to try it? I see a little attitude problem there. Did you want to? Did you want to try it, Renee?
If we all heave-ho, I think
No. We had one guy do it.
Oh,
I think one girl ought to be able to do it.
In heels, no.
I would be willing to try and help if I had better shoes on.
No, I didn't say help. I said do it. In any event, once again, if you can see in there, you can see that the rear engine makes for a high loading platform in the back, so you give up that, but you get a great loading platform here on the side. Christine, what do you think we've got here now?
3 Corvairs.
No, but don't these look a little different to you?
Yeah, they do. Why is that?
Okay, this is the next generation of Corvairs, and again, I'd like to stop and talk to Cindy and Renee and the other Cindy, little Cindy, big Cindy, and all that, but we are running short of time. Larry, this is the next generation of Corvairs, and as some people would say, this is when they fixed them, although I'm not sure I particularly agree with that. Do you?
Well, fix is a relative thing. The cars are very different in their external appearance. These are very contemporary looking cars even today. All the models were hardtop styles. There's no pillars on any of them. The rear suspension on these 65 and later cars was completely redesigned, a 4-link independent suspension, essentially the same as used on the Corvette, except it uses coil springs instead of leaf springs.
Okay, come down with me down here. Let's start at the 4-door, because the 4-door, I think the enthusiasts would agree, that's one that they kind of just barely tolerate, right? That's not something that they embrace with open arms like the Spider convertibles and all that sort of thing. Come on right down here.
At the time,
come right over here.
Okay, at the time, it was still important to Chevrolet to have a 4-door in the lineup, and they
were still thinking economy sedan
car
for the folks and everything. And to be sure, this was a prettier design, more attractive, although of course it was several years later. Right. And the rear suspension you're talking about, I don't want to gloss over that quite so quickly, because that was a significant change, because they went from a swing axle design to really, a swing axle is fully independent, but the thing with CV joints at inner and outer CV joints really is a much better design.
Yeah, it's a significant improvement in road handling. In fact, in General Motors' own tests, the Corvair, 65 and later Corvairs, equaled the cornering capabilities of the 65 or the 63 and newer Corvettes.
No question about it, and that's why these things had such a strong cult following.
Right.
Is these things handle like sports cars.
Right, precisely. The 65 and newer is definitely sports car origin in its handling.
Okay, tell us about this one.
This is the Corvair 500. This is the lowest price line of Corvairs. It's the 4-door hardtop. This car is your basic low bucks Corvair. It has very good room front and rear for everybody, flat floors of course, and this car when new retailed only for about $2,100.
Right, and we should tell our audience that this car is original in every detail. Original wires, this one is totally original.
Paint and every detail on this car, including the tires, are original on.
Let's move on to the convertible now, because I'm a person that's a big fan of convertibles, and I always thought that they got the convertible styling just right with these. And Chuck, if you take a look at that while we talk, go ahead and explain this one.
Well, the 65 and later, of course, appeared in a convertible in 2 series, the Monza, which was the main selling line, and also the higher performance Corsa model. This one's a Monza, features the optional wire wheel covers, and it's your convertible. They're very desirable today.
Did this one have the 4 carburetors or no?
This particular car has the regular 2 carburetor engine. The Corsa model had the 4 carb engine as standard equipment, and the turbo is a $187 option.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. Now let's move on down here. And Renee, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry. Let me just. Okay. By the way, what do you think? Nice in there?
Gorgeous in here.
Yeah, this car is immaculate in and out. Is this a restoration? Somebody did a great job there.
Yeah, this car is owned by Ron Herman, and he got it all restored. It's a really fine car.
It's really nice. Now let's move on down here to the coupe. And of course, many would suggest that the coupe model was perhaps the most popular. Not everybody's a convertible enthusiast like I am, but tell us what we've got here.
Yeah, this is a 65 Corvair Monza coupe. This is the best-selling of the later series cars. This particular model, the 65 Monza 2-door hardtop, sold more of these than any other year model Corvair.
Okay, now we've got a bunch more to show you. Folks, believe me, you haven't seen, we're going to show you the real cool stuff. Now, is that right, or do we have any more?
Oh, we got some way cool stuff,
right,
Bill.
or do we have to do any more of the pedestrian stuff to properly tell the Corvair story?
No, I think you've seen a good representation of the basic Corvairs that you had down at your Chevrolet dealership, and then we're going to show you some special ones.
All right, Christine, now we're getting up to my kind of stuff, the toy versions. What do you think?
Really nice.
Yeah, what's important about this one that you're standing by?
I don't know.
Well, Renee, we'll see if you do. I'm walking all the way over here because she popped up and said, I do. What's important about it?
Because it has a turbo.
What does that mean? Say it.
Because it has a turbo.
Turbo what?
Engine.
Turbo what?
Booster. Turbo something.
Turbo charger.
Charger.
And what is a turbocharger?
I'm a compressor.
Chris is yelling compressor.
No, she wasn't.
and what does that do to an engine?
I'm thinking it speeds it up.
Well,
more power. I don't know.
Exactly. A supercharger can double the power of an engine, triple it. It can put in so much power you can blow the bottom out of it with no problem at all.
Something like that.
Okay, but you did kind of know. I'm impressed. You did kind of know. Okay. We talked for a moment about the Corvair Spider, which of course, in my mind, because I've always been a performance enthusiast, was the most significant of all of the Corvair models, clearly the fastest.
Yeah, when the image from the Corvair turned from the family type car into the sporty version, the Spider was the kind of the pinnacle of that change in there, and this was introduced in 1962. This is the original Spider model, and for an additional about $370 over the cost of a regular Corvair Monza, you could get the Spider package, which included the turbocharged engine. It was more than 1 horsepower per cubic inch. Also included full instrumentation, tachometer, temperature gauge, boost gauge, and a very economical car as far as your initial purchase price. Because it was turbocharged, you still got reasonably good mileage just driving around town, but it really gave the car a performance boost.
Okay, as a matter of fact, and Chuck, if you can take a shot of the car while we're talking, if you haven't done so already, if I remember correctly, the boost on it was only about 5 or 6 pounds.
Yeah, that's correct. The boost was limited by the design of the engine in order to make it economical. Instead of using wastegates or other elaborate devices, they simply used a smaller size carburetor and a very specific restriction muffler to limit the overall boost.
Okay, and we should also say then that those of us that were around back then, and I clearly was because I graduated from high school in 1961, they came out with Corvairs in 60 and manufactured them through 1969 for 10 model years. So I was obviously at that age very cognizant of everything, and our friends knew how to bring the boost up to 10, 12, 14, 15 pounds, and they were pumping over 250 horsepower.
Oh yeah, people still do it. There's all sorts of ways to boost the performance of turbo Corvairs, and they can be very, very fast.
Okay, the audience will forgive me. We are ducking bees out here. If you see us flinching from time to time, this is the time of the year when the bees are going through their final flight. I think we'd be safe. But yes, so you're aware of that, of the guys that really boosted the power out of these things.
Basically, removing the restriction on both the inlet and the outlet side, getting rid of the muffler, and using much bigger carburation, that will give tremendous increase in the boost pressure.
Okay, now let's step down here because this one on this side is really a totally different kind of animal, and the famous Yanko Spiders, or Stingers rather, were actually road racing cars.
Yeah, that's how they came about. Don Yanko had been a Corvette racer for years, and when the 65 model Corvairs came out, he looked at it and said, you know, this car has potential. This car could do good in road racing. They campaigned some 65 Corvairs with great success, and near 66, he thought, you know, if I could get this thing set up for SCCA racing, I think we could win in it. And that's exactly what he went about doing. He ordered 100 identical white 66 Corvair Corsas, modified them with the fiberglass deck lid with the built-in spoiler on the back, the fiberglass sail filler panels, and some performance items, headers, low restriction exhaust, specific options on the car. He got Chevrolet division to back up the warranties on them and make them up 389 gear sets that were not normally available on regular Corvairs, tweak the engines a bit, and they came in several different stages of tune, stages 1 through 4. And in fact, in 1967, with Dick Thompson at the wheel, they did in fact win the SCCA D Production Championship.
Yes, and again, this really explains a lot of why the Corvairs had such a strong cult following, because the people that were into sports car events, into road racing, gymkhanas, things like that, you really couldn't have a better car than a Corvair.
All right, the handling on a Corvair, you know, it's not a top-end machine, it's not a 400 horsepower machine, but you can just make up the difference in the corners because you can go in so much harder and faster than other cars with the very good braking and very good balance on the Corvair. Corvairs are still actively road raced, and successfully so, even in the 90s.
Yes, now hold on one second, we've got a question, and Renee, what a surprise.
Well, when they said, hang on, there's a bee on me. When they said street racing, do they know what
you don't
the
want to play with them, they'll sting you.
Well, I'm getting to know the cars and bees today.
Go ahead.
When they said street racing, did they know what numbers this car pulled, or was it different?
You're talking about drag racing?
Well, I'm just saying, could they figure it out by street racing? I mean, street racing is not the same as drag down a strip.
No,
right?
in fact, we don't even call street racing racing, really. But is your inquiry about what kind of drag strip numbers these cars would turn?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Give us some feel, starting with, give us a broad general, from the baseline 2 carburetor engine to the turbocharged versions. What kind of drag strip numbers?
The very lowest horsepower cars, the 80 horsepower cars, 1960, 61, with the automatic, they're going to be the slowest at approximately 20 seconds in the quarter. The hottest engines, the turbocharged Corvair models, the 180 horse and 65 and 66, run about 15.5 stock.
Right, and I can tell our audience that in the 8th mile drag races, they were absolutely killer cars.
Yeah, because there's no wheel spin with the Corvair's rear engine traction. You just come off the line so hard that you just got everybody beat, you know, the first few feet.
Wait a minute.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, they are really quick off the line. We've got one more Corvair to show that is really a statement, don't we? Don't give it away.
Locals figure it's souped.
Okay, this is something. All right, somebody just grabbed us and said you almost forgot about the Corvair station wagon. Corvair did have station wagons.
Yeah, they made them in 61 and 62, a total of about 33,000 cars. It has the unique advantage that being a station wagon and a Corvair, it also has a trunk in the front and a fairly roomy area in the back.
Well, I'm not sure if don't run away. I'm not sure if I'd call it exactly really roomy. Renee, come over here, and for the folks in our audience, open this tailgate. Go ahead. I want you to open this and show the real problem with a rear engine car. Go right ahead. Now, that's pretty high to load things, isn't it? Come here.
Yes, you can't have anything that's really tall.
Well, it's not just a matter of tall. Everything you have to lift up, you've got to lift up over the engine, in effect, because the engine is right under here. So that is a problem. I can kind of see, let's go ahead and step back. I can kind of see where a Corvair station wagon wouldn't be real popular. As a matter of fact, if they only made 33,000 of them in 2 years, that's a lower production than Corvettes.
Oh, sure, yeah, it's very low, and as soon as the Chevy 2 came out in 62, its wagon immediately outsold the Corvair wagon because it was just more utilitarian. That's what wagon buyers wanted.
Right. Yes, Renee?
I think it's hotter than my Nissan Maxima.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't disagree with you there, as a matter of fact. Renee, this may be my favorite piece here. Come out here. I want you to step right out here like this and take a look. What do you think?
Why
what
is
do you
it
think
your favorite
What do you think, the fanciest car here, you think?
Not the best body, but maybe the interior or maybe the engine that you like.
Okay, so there's something about this that I really like, right?
It's got to be.
Okay, come on down here. I want you to join Cindy. Cindy, I've got a job for you. I want to show the audience right off the bat why this is absolutely my favorite. Go ahead and open that engine compartment. Go right ahead. Okay, and come over here. Tell the audience what you see there. Go ahead, take a look at it, and tell them what you see.
Well, a much larger and completely different engine.
Okay, I'm going to have you step right over here right now, join the girls there, and we will find out why I'm so enchanted with this car. First of all, you are.
Al Betker.
And where are you from, Al?
Chicago, Illinois.
Tell the folks why I like this particular Corvair.
Basically, it's powered by a 500 cubic inch Cadillac engine and intent on drag racing only.
Yes, as a matter of fact, this is one of those front drive Cadillac engines that you've apparently turned the entire drive system around. You're obviously not using the Corvair transaxle for this.
No, correct. It's a complete Eldorado and Toronado combination. All it is it's the front wheel drive, and it's just all been moved back. Instead of pulling the car, it now pushes the car.
How difficult was the installation?
There was a kit made years ago. This is my
really?
second one, and I saved the blueprints from the first car back about 15 years ago, and finally had the time and money to do it again.
Do you drive it on the street or strictly for drag racing?
No, this is going to be driven on the street and driven to the drag strips.
You say it's your second one. Do you run into anything that can match this?
I'm sure there's always somebody bigger and badder, but yeah, so far.
Okay. Yes, we got a question down here, Kim.
Is there any? Nobody's talked about any prices on the cars. Does that make it any difference in the price comparison between this and the others?
Okay, well, the answer is real quick, and we're getting a wrap-up sign. The answer is real quick. For people that are Corvair purists, they would detest this. They wouldn't consider this for anything. For somebody like me who just likes fast cars, I love a missile like this. It would be worth a lot to me, and that's kind of how it goes. Do I have it about right?
You got it on the head.
Okay, don't run away now. Let me get down here. We've got, actually, I just wanted to show this real quick. We've got one more thing to do, so tell the folks.
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
The Corvair is a delightful car with a loyal following. The Chicagoland Corvair Enthusiasts Club is one of the oldest and largest in the country and keeps its memory alive. Let's wrap things up.
Renee, have we answered your question you started with at the beginning of the show? As first of all, what is a Corvair and what happened to the Corvair?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Thank you.
so everybody has a good idea what this is all about? Well, what do you think? Corvair's fun cars?
Very fun, and I learned something too.
Cindy?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, they are pretty cool, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, now, Larry, first of all, I got to thank you and Mary Beth. You guys were just wonderful hosts today. It is rare when I wanted to run into somebody that's so knowledgeable about this thing and have such a supportive partner. It's really a wonderful experience. Is there anything that we haven't said that we should have said?
Well, I'd just like to tell everybody that the Chicagoland Corvair Enthusiasts meets the third Wednesday of every month at the Elmhurst VFW Hall. All Corvair owners and people interested in Corvairs are welcome to attend.
Okay, now you're going to take the girls?
Yep, you bet.
Well, I know something you don't know. You're bringing them back. We'll see. Tell the folks.
Bye. Bye.